Social policy means policies that affect people in a kind of public, social sense.
Social policy really impacts very directly on things like levels of equality, levels of social cohesion and social solidarity.
It's about what people do, it's about how people live, and it's how to make life better for people.
There are some issues which can be influenced when the state get involved, which you might think of as private matters, but policy can make a big difference to help individuals to realise the lifestyles that they want to.
It's about the taxes that we pay, it's about the benefits that we receive.
Not just looking at things like income and health, but also looking at other sort of social outcomes, things like education, crime, and how different sort of government policies and the way society works affects that.
We work with how you work out those questions, how you think about needs, rights, responsibilities and how they all come together.
The impact of social policy is very far-reaching, and it's far-reaching in terms of the government and how society works. So when we're looking at pensions and unemployment, that obviously has a big impact on the Treasury and how government finances work, but also it's far-reaching in terms of its impact on people's lives. When we talk about young people perhaps involved in antisocial behaviour, you might at first think that's a criminal justice issue, but one of the ways we can deal with young people perhaps is through a more welfare-centred approach, which is very much a social policy issue.
I analyse policies that are produced which I think may have some kind of impact on health to see whether the people they were trying to help in some way, whether they did actually have those intended effects. But I also try and look at how different groups try and influence what goes into the policy in the first place. So I've done quite a lot of work on the tobacco industry and how they try and influence policy.
So I work mainly on unemployment benefit and labour market policies, and this is an area where in Europe there's a huge diversity. In some countries we emphasise very strongly the monetary incentives, and we have to make benefits as ungenerous as possible so people have strong incentives not to remain on benefit for long periods of time. In other countries we have quite a different understanding of the incentives. We think that the important thing to incentivise is that people take time to make the right choice, because that's likely to be good for the job match that they have and probably good for productivity levels in the economy as a whole.
At the moment I work on employment and welfare reform issues and lifelong learning issues, which is further education and higher education. That's a very topical issue for the Scottish Government. So my job is around creating evidence, looking at statistics, economic analysis, research, to try and find out what policies might work best to help in all of those areas.
My particular interest is in child welfare, so social policies can have a huge impact in the way that we treat children and young people in our society. It's fantastic really to be able to work with children and young people and see their own views on the policies that are shaping their lives.
I'm particularly interested in how different social groups interact, both within the group and also with each other. And the way I get at that mostly is by using survey data, looking for variation, what that can tell us about certain issues such as family leave policy and how people organise work and their family sort of balance.
My area of research is looking at the Europeanization of education policy and governance. Over the last 20 years, education has been transformed from its previous ordered and institutionalized sequences into a far more fluid and flexible cross-national phenomenon. So learning has become very important as a key economic resource. Learning is important for the promotion of social cohesion. It has become more and more important in relation to ideas about how governing should be pursued.
We're obviously undergoing a really difficult time across the UK, issues of recession.
Well, I think we are doing really important work because people are having to make all sorts of decisions.
Public budgets are going to be slashed, and given that social policy represents 2/3 of government expenditure in most developed countries, I mean, social policy expenditure is really in the front line.
Social policy traditionally was about government, and over the last 20 years it's moved from that, and increasingly we can see a push sort of after the financial crisis of a greater move away from the government doing things and expecting other groups in society to do things and take responsibility for people's welfare. And I think that will be a very big area in terms of what we're studying over the next few years.
There's probably going to be less support for people who are unemployed or temporarily don't have somewhere to live. And these kinds of things can have massive long-term consequences.
This argument that's often put, we aren't able to do this for all sorts of reasons, which are usually external reasons, this needs to be at least challenged, looking at the evidence.
The next decade will be very important in the sense that there is a move at the moment from policymakers to move away from GDP as being the prime indicator for the success of a nation, and actually move to more soft indicators that measure happiness, well-being, better health, different kinds of outcomes for the people.
So there are particular challenges ahead, which makes it an ideal time to study a subject like social policy.